What do you mean Jotaro and Holy are pillarmen? What an absurd thing this sounds like. You might be right now, who's this delusional human being who thought about this? But the neat part is that it actually makes perfect sense. Believe it or not, always in Stardust, Crusaders and other parts of JOJO, with the presence of Jotaro, it has been communicated in many ways that he's a pillarman all along. If you still think this is lunacy, then stay until the end of this video. This is definitely not something that's been discussed at all, because it's a new theory that I found, so I'll bring light to it in this video. And now a request: if you enjoy my content, consider hitting the like button below and subscribing to the channel, as well as leaving a comment. With that being said, let me prove to you that Jotaro and his mother, Holy Joestar, are pillarmen. The pillarmen are beings who lived a long time ago. I can't be sure exactly, but if Araki is leveraging real history here, that would mean the pillarmen would exist on the American continent, specifically in Latin America, right around the Valley of Mexico during the pre-Columbian era. They possess strength and speed at levels incomparable to humans. Nevertheless, they harness a vulnerability to sunlight, consequently rendering them weak against hamon energy. This species is used to sleeping for long periods of time. I'm talking like thousands of years. Unfortunately, these people had a tragic fate. Even though the vast majority of them had already conformed their fragility to sunlight, there was a certain someone who wasn't satisfied with that, so he sought a method of attaining perfection. He was called Kars, who elaborated a stone mask capable of unlocking hidden powers on pillarmen, although he managed to become superior to everyone in his tribe. This mask was not quintessential due to the firmness of his skin and bone density, so it doesn't pierce all the intended parts of the brain. To put it succinctly, the others in the pillarmen tribe discovered what he was doing and opposed to the idea, so he killed all of them except for ECDC, a baby who would eventually become Wamo, and Santana. Now we are going to address the elephant in the room for this theory. Why the hell would Jotaro be a pillarman? Sit tight, because I'll work my way up from the most surface level indications to the most palpable ones. There are several moments throughout Stardust Crusaders that clearly show that Jotaro is not a normal teenager. During the fight against Kakyoin in the second episode, he mentions the fact that he exaggerated in the fights he was involved and ended up sending his opponents to the hospital. Maybe he was just really good at slugging people. It's possible. We know Jotaro is a tough guy, but it may not explain everything. There is much more to this theory to analyze. Like for example, during the fight against Yellow Temperance, Jotaro showed above average resistance and unusual self-control. His hand was being cooked after he tried to remove the goo with a lighter. All he did was amplify the damage dealt to his hand. Jotaro did seem a little disturbed and surprised by the pain, but we're talking about a fervent liquid increasingly spreading itself in your body. How did he not scream in anguish from the torturing sensation of the worst pain your body can experience? And then he jumps on a cable car, takes a child's popsicle and places it over the yellow goo, which only caused it to harden and form spikes inside of his hand. And once again, we see Jotaro with a facial expression of mild discomfort. And it's no use to say this was the resistance of Star Platinum, because Star Platinum wasn't even partially manifested, as they usually do when they want to infer that Jotaro was under his protection, as we saw several times during the fight of Jotaro versus Dio. But without a doubt, another important piece for this theory takes place during the fight against the stand of Alessi, Seth. Right after Polnareff had a very difficult time trying to escape this homicidal mania, he managed to hide in the water and use Silver Chariot to pierce his nose, leaving Alessi squealing in agony. He then jumped out of the window to escape. He ended up running into Jotaro. Alessi was able to revert Jotaro's age to back when he was a kid, because as Polnareff didn't remember Jotaro, he could not warn him. What made that a big problem is that Jotaro had only gotten his stand at the age of 17, different from Polnareff, who was born with stand. So Jotaro found himself in a situation where he was utterly defenseless, right? Wrong. Because Jotaro, even though he was a child, managed to beat up Alessi, and you have to consider the size of this guy. I mean, he's already ripped. If he was a little taller, he could play the Pillarman song to him. And Jotaro, a child, messed him up. Maybe that was just a humorous and playful vibe Araki was going for. But what if he was hiding something? Maybe there is an ulterior factor at play here. And that's what brings me to the next question. How is Jotaro a Pillarman? To answer this question, we need to go back to 1938 to cover the Battle Tendency events, the second part of JOJO. Anyways, episode 18, after the arduous clash of Joseph and ACDC, although Joseph had come out of that confront victorious, ACDC managed to stay partially alive. His brain and nervous system grabbed onto JoJo's back, then it infiltrated Suzy Q. He used her identity to send the Red Stone of Asia to his other two accomplices. ACDC planned to kill Suzy Q, but Josephine Caesar channeled hamon energy all across her body, which made possible for ACDC to be expelled from her body and die as a consequence. And this is exactly where this crazy theory comes into play. What if there was a remnant of the DNA of ACDC on Suzy Q? What if Caesar and Joseph failed to thoroughly eradicate every single molecule of DNA of ACDC? After all, we're talking about a guy that had his body entirely destroyed, but managed to complete the mission delegated to him. It would be really interesting to think that he kept a portion of himself in the body of Suzy Q, even because at that point he already knew what Hamon was capable of. He's not dumb. It would be perfectly plausible if he somehow found a way to stay alive. Maybe he didn't leave a significant part of himself linked to her as a parasite, at least not to the point where he would be able to awaken and control her again, but enough so that there is a kind of virus or DNA active within Joseph's future wife, something that would eventually pass on to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, like Holly, Jotaro, and Jolie. Even because although I have not mentioned Jolie, just like our father, displayed various physical attributes far beyond that of a human. However, not everything is so simple. I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you of all the points in this theory that end up running into contradictions, and we are going to talk about these points right now. Let's start with the things that seem more obvious. If both Holly and Jotaro have indeed pillarmen DNA, why is it that only Jotaro demonstrated levels of strength above average? Why would Holly be such a fragile woman, to the point of not being able to withstand the manifestation of her own stand? Why is it that only Jotaro and Jolene showed themselves to be extremely powerful, given that they should have much less pillarmen DNA in their body? Not to mention that the pillarmen have a great aversion to sunlight, just like normal vampires. They would die almost instantly if exposed to UV rays, so why none of which demonstrated any kind of revulsion to this aspect of their nature? I won't settle with sharing with you a theory chock full of inconsistencies and plot holes, so I'm gonna rebuttal every single point of contention I brought up so far, so let's go. Starting with the problem related to sunlight, we can consider that the lack of aversion to sunlight is due to their human DNA they obviously still possess, which would affect Jotaro even less, since we can conclude that Holly, for being the daughter of Suzy Q, scientifically speaking, she would carry 50% of the altered DNA of her mother, while Jotaro, for being the son of a half-pillarman and a common man, would have 25% of his DNA altered. Naturally, this DNA would progressively be purged from the Joestar family, so it's possible to consider that they didn't inherit everything the pillarman DNA could offer. But precisely, this is what brings us to the most complicated stage in this account. If the percentage of pillarman DNA is higher in Holly than it is in Jotaro, why is he superhumanly strong and she's so frail? Additionally, there is the detail concerning how Jotaro had no difficulty to awaken his stand ability, whereas she was languishing for 50 days under the same circumstance. Well, there is a more simple reason for that. Holly was a hamon user. What is the only thing the pillarmen dread beyond sunlight? Exactly, hamon, because the energy hamon emanates mirrors that of the sun. But how do I know that Holly was a hamon user? Well, that's because of her stand. Although we have not seen practically anything about her stand, there is already crucial information of it to arrive at this conclusion. It has the appearance of various vines and rose stems, very similar to the stand of her father, Hermit Purple, but it doesn't just look like Hermit Purple. It seems a lot like Jonathan's stand too, because the specific kind of stand is written by Araki as the standard for hamon user. Take my word with a grain of salt, I'm merely pointing out patterns here, but one thing you cannot deny is that it becomes clear if we analyze the big picture. But anyway, what would that have to do with the holy stand disease? Well, beyond the spiritual abilities of this stand, it works as an extension of the body of its user. Therefore, it's possible to use hamon through the stand. This element was crucial during Joseph's battle against Dio, since he coated his body with Hermit Purple and hamon, deterring any attempts of direct attacks against him. With that in mind, what if Holly had a predisposition to acquire a stand, but not for a biological reason? She would not have the predisposition to have that specific stand. Are you following? This type of stand is a natural conductor of hamon energy, and Holly is a hamon user since birth, even without she realizing it. Perhaps she was not withering on the grounds that she could not bear awakening a stand, but instead the stand was constantly pumping hamon through her body, creating a never-ending fight between her pillarman biology and the solar energy that was being sent to her. And with the gradual development of her stand, Holly's body was weakening and dying, since there was pillarman DNA in her genes. But there is still something to rationalize. If Holly didn't have a revulsion to sunlight because of her human nature, why would hamon hurt her so much? It seems like a reasonable thing to think, but you're comparing apples to oranges. Not feeling the effects of sunlight on your body is one thing. Something else is having your stand produce solar energy inside your whole body at a level far beyond what she could endure on a daily basis. Well, but didn't Josuke also get sick? And he's not Holy's son. What if I told you that Josuke's illness had absolutely nothing to do with the awakening of his stand, Crazy Diamond? I'm straying more and more from the common belief, but hear me out. At any point has it ever been mentioned that Josuke almost dying was in virtue of attaining Crazy Diamond? People just think so because the dates were compatible. A similar occurrence happened to Jolene, where she would mention that when she got sickly, her father didn't even care to pay a visit. We know she wasn't awakening a stand since she only did so later as a young adult in prison. We also have to remember one thing. The whole mission of the Stardust Crusaders was to defeat Dio and prevent Holy from awakening her stand to its fullest. But if defeating Dio prevented her from gaining a stand, why didn't it impede Josuke as well? If by some chance he had been attaining a stand at that moment, Crazy Diamond would have never seen the light of day, and you're not taking into account the several moments of Diamond is Unbreakable, in which we see all kinds of people awakening its stands without major difficulty. Examples are Shizuka, Ken, among others, pierced by the arrow used by Kira's father. They all had the necessary ability to withstand their newly acquired stand abilities without getting sick. Why wouldn't Josuke of all people be able to do the same? Jotaro had no trouble awakening Gold Experience when he was much younger than Josuke, that is. He should be a lot weaker than Josuke, so Josuke getting sick just doesn't affect this theory at all. There is absolutely nothing proving that Jotaro is not a pillar man, but now I wanna hear it from you guys. What do you think of this theory? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. With that being said, thanks for watching this video. See you in the next one.